In the heart of the vast African plains, nestled between rolling hills and thick forest, lay Kijani village, a place of harmony, tradition, and unwavering beliefs. For generations, the people of Kijani had lived by sacred customs that ensured their prosperity and peace. Among these traditions, one rule stood above all: the purity of their daughters. Every girl in Kijani was expected to remain chaste until marriage, a virtue deeply woven into the village's identity. It was believed that this sacred purity brought blessings from the gods, ensuring bountiful harvest, strong warriors, and protection from misfortune. The elders, wise and respected, often gathered beneath the baobab tree of wisdom, sharing tales of past generations and reminding the young of their sacred duty. Parents instilled this belief in their daughters from childhood, teaching them that their virtue was a gift to their future husbands and a source of pride for their families. During the annual festival of purity, the village celebrated its maidens with great honor. They adorned the young girls in flowing white garments, symbolizing their innocence, and paraded them through the village while songs of praise filled the air. Families took immense pride in showcasing their daughters, reaffirming their place in society as upholders of tradition. But as the festival approached this year, something extraordinary happened. A royal proclamation was sent from the palace of King Omori. The prince, heir to the throne, had reached the age of marriage, and he sought a virtuous bride from among the purest maidens of the land. The news spread through Kijani like wildfire. Families saw this as a golden opportunity, not only for their daughters but for their entire lineage. The girl chosen would bring great honor, riches, and prestige to her family. For weeks, the village buzzed with excitement as mothers prepared their daughters, ensuring they were ready for the selection ceremony. Fathers boasted in the village square, "My daughter has never even spoken to a man outside her family. Mine is the purest of all, she shall be queen." The confidence in the village was absolute. Every family believed their daughter would pass the test of purity and win the prince's favor. Yet, amidst the joy and preparations, whispers of unease began to stir. Some strange occurrences unsettled the elders. Birds that once chirped melodious songs now fell silent at dusk. The sacred river, always crystal clear, began to turn murky. The village shaman, Elder Beo, observed these omens with a troubled heart. He warned the chief that the gods were restless, that something unseen was disrupting the balance of Kijani. But the villagers dismissed his words, too engulfed in the excitement of the royal selection. They did not realize that their world was about to change forever. For on the horizon, a shadow approached, one that would shake the very foundation of their traditions. And her name was Zina. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm amber glow over Kijani village, an unfamiliar presence made its way through the dusty paths. Zina, a young woman from the city, had arrived to visit her aunt, Mama Joho, who lived on the outskirts of the village. Zina was unlike any woman the villagers had ever seen. Her skin gleamed like polished ebony, and her eyes, sharp and full of mystery, held the weight of untold stories. But it was her attire and demeanor that caught everyone's attention. Unlike the village women, who wore traditional woven fabrics, Zina dressed in tight, colorful garments that accentuated her curves. She walked with an air of confidence, her back straight, her chin lifted, as if she owned the ground she walked upon. As she passed through the village square, conversations hushed. Women eyed her with suspicion, while men stole lingering glances. "Who is she?" whispered one of the market women. "I heard she's from the city," another murmured. "Look at the way she walks, like she is above us." But it was not just the older generation who noticed Zina. The young girls of Kijani watched her in fascination. She was different from them, bold, fearless, and unbothered by tradition. That evening, Zina settled into her aunt's hut. Mama Joha, a respected herbalist, welcomed her warmly but warned, "Kijani is not like the city, my child. Here, we honor our ways." Zina only smiled, a knowing glint in her eyes. She had no intention of following the rules. Over the next few days, Zina explored the village, and it wasn't long before the young women of Kijani gravitated toward her. At first, they were cautious, merely observing her from a distance. But soon, their curiosity got the better of them. They began sneaking away from their families to spend time with her, eager to learn about the world beyond their village. Zina told them stories of the city, of grand buildings, lavish feasts, and a life where women were not bound by old traditions. In the city, women are free, she told them. We wear what we want, do what we want. Men admire us, and they shower us with gifts. The village girls listened, their eyes wide with wonder. Gifts, one of them, Eo, asked curiously. Yes, Zina replied with a smirk. When a woman knows her power, men will do anything for her. The words lingered in their minds. For the first time, they questioned the traditions they had been taught. It started subtly. Some girls began wearing their wrappers differently, revealing more of their shoulders and arms. Others styled their hair like Zina's, braiding it with beads that jingled when they walked. The elders noticed the change but dismissed it at first. After all, what harm could a few beads and exposed shoulders do? But soon, the change became more than just appearance. The young women of Kijani started to sneak away at night, meeting in secret to talk about the city and all the possibilities it held. And Zina? She smiled in satisfaction. She knew it was only a matter of time before they fully embraced her way of life. What the village didn't know, however, was that Zina carried a secret. A secret that would unravel everything Kijani stood for. As the moon cast its silver glow over Kijani village, the once quiet nights began to stir with whispers and giggles. The young women, once obedient daughters of the land, now slipped away under the cover of darkness, drawn by a newfound curiosity, a forbidden thrill they had never known before. Zina had not just introduced them to stories of the city, she had introduced them to power, the kind that made men weak and generous. One evening, as the village slept, Adana, the chief's eldest daughter, followed Zina beyond the outskirts of Kijani. Hidden behind the trees, she watched in shock as Zina met with a wealthy merchant from a nearby town. The man greeted Zina with admiration, handing her a pouch filled with coins and fine fabrics. In return, she whispered into his ear, laughed sweetly, and touched his arm with gentle, practiced grace. Adana's heart pounded. So this is how she gets her riches, she thought. She had always believed that wealth came from labor or marriage, but this was something different. Something easier. When Zina returned, Adana could not hold back her curiosity. What did you do to make him give you all that? She asked. Zina smiled knowingly. Men are simple, Adana. Give them attention, make them feel powerful, and they will give you the world. Adana hesitated. She had been raised with strict values, but she could not deny the allure of what she had seen. Could I do it too? She whispered. Of course, Zina purred. You're beautiful. The men already look at you. Why not let them admire you, and gain something in return? The words burrowed into Adana's mind. The chief's daughter, the pride of the village, was now at a crossroads. And she made her choice. The very next evening, Adana met with a young merchant who had long admired her. At first, she was nervous. But she remembered Zina's words, the soft touch, the playful laugh, the power of a woman's gaze. To her surprise, the merchant responded exactly as Zina had predicted. He was captivated. And before she knew it, he handed her a necklace of fine beads as a gift. Adana's heart raced. That was so easy, she thought. She ran back to the village, eager to share her discovery. Before long, more girls began to follow in her footsteps. They met with travelers and traders in secret, exchanging soft words and stolen moments for gifts of fine cloth, jewelry, and coins. They began to dress differently, adorning themselves with new jewelry and perfumes that once only belonged to married women. They found excitement in their attention, a thrill that their simple village lives had never offered them before. Zina watched with satisfaction as Kijani's daughters embraced a new way of life. The village was changing, and no one even realized. At first, the parents did not suspect a thing. They saw their daughters return home with small gifts, but they assumed it was from friendships with neighboring villages. But the elders noticed something strange. The once reserved maidens of Kijani now walked with newfound confidence, their laughter louder, their gazes bolder. And then, rumors began to spread. A young boy overheard his sister sneaking out at night. A merchant bragged in another town about the beauty of Kijani's maidens. An elder caught a glimpse of Adana receiving a gift from a stranger. The whispers grew. Why are the girls acting strangely? Where are they getting these gifts? Why do they vanish at night? The village elders grew restless. Something was happening, something they could not yet see. And then, the first omen appeared. A sacred cow, blessed since birth and untouched by man, was found lifeless in the fields. Its body lay cold, its eyes wide with an unnatural stillness. The shaman, Elder Beo, was called to inspect the creature. His face darkened as he traced his fingers over its fur. He turned to the village chief and spoke in a grave tone. The gods are watching. Something has been tainted in Kijani. And soon, the gods will reveal the truth. Unbeknownst to the villagers, the time of reckoning was near. For in just a few days, the oracle would arrive for the festival of purity, where the maidens of Kijani would undergo the sacred test. A test that none of them would pass. And when that day came, the village would finally learn the horrifying truth. That there were no more virgins in Kijani. As the festival of purity drew closer, Kijani village paused with excitement. Families prepared their daughters for the sacred test, believing without question that their virtue remained intact. Mothers braided their daughters' hair, humming traditional songs of purity. Fathers polished their finest robes, eager to stand before the village with pride. The village square was decorated with woven banners, and the scent of roasting meats filled the air. But beneath the surface, things were different this year. The young women, once eager to showcase their virtue, now avoided the subject. They knew what was coming. They had all followed Zina's path, and none of them were pure anymore. As the day of the test approached, whispers of fear filled the air. What if we are discovered? The elders will know. What will our families do to us? Adana, the chief's daughter, felt the weight of her choices pressing down on her. She had led many of the village girls into Zina's ways. But now, she feared what would happen when the truth came out. She ran to Zina's hut, her chest tight with anxiety. Zina, we're in trouble. Adana cried. If we fail the test, our families will disown us. What do we do? Zina remained calm, running a golden necklace through her fingers. She smirked. Do you think your elders really have the power to see the truth? She asked. Their traditions are based on fear, not fact. But the oracle is just an old man who plays tricks to keep you obedient, Zina interrupted. You've tasted freedom, Adana. Do you want to go back to being a caged bird? Adana hesitated. Zina's words had always made sense before. But this time, she wasn't so sure. The night before the festival, a violent storm swept through Kijani. Lightning split the sacred baobab tree in half. The village's cattle grew sick, their once healthy bodies now frail and weak. And worst of all, the village's crops, untouched by disease for generations, began to rot overnight. The villagers awoke to a sight of horror. Elder Beo, the village shaman, hurried to the chief's hut. His voice trembled as he spoke. The gods have sent a warning, he said. Something has disturbed the balance of Kijani. The chief, troubled by the signs, called for an emergency meeting of the elders. They gathered in the sacred shrine, sitting in a circle around a burning flame. "We have honored our traditions," one elder said. "Why would the gods be angry?" Elder Beo closed his eyes. He could feel the shift in the energy of Kijani. "Not all have honored the ways," he murmured. "Something has changed among our daughters." The elders exchanged worried glances. It was then that the chief made a grave decision. "Tomorrow, during the festival, we will perform the test of purity on all the maidens. If they are found unworthy, the gods will decide their fate. The entire village would soon witness the truth. And no one would be able to hide any more." At sunrise, the villagers gathered in the square. Drums pounded in rhythmic beats as the elders stood in the center, waiting for the young maidens to step forward. The oracle, a blind old man with wisdom beyond his years, arrived from the sacred hills. He carried a clay pot filled with enchanted water. It was said that only the pure could retrieve the golden necklace submerged within it. One by one, the maidens were called. Adana stepped forward first. The crowd watched in anticipation as she dipped her hands into the water. Her fingers brushed against something, but when she pulled them out, they were empty. A hush fell over the crowd. The second girl stepped forward. She too reached in. Nothing. A third. A fourth. A fifth. None of them could retrieve the necklace. A ripple of horrified whispers spread through the crowd. "Impossible," someone gasped. "Try again," another voice shouted. "This must be a mistake." But the oracle's face remained stone-cold. He raised his hands for silence. "There is no mistake," he said. His voice was like thunder rolling through the village. "None of them are pure." The weight of his words crashed over the crowd like a tidal wave. The elders stood in shock. The fathers lowered their heads in shame. The mothers wept. The chief turned to his daughter, his eyes burning with rage. "Adana," he roared. "You have brought disgrace upon my house." But Adana, trembling, could not answer. She was not the only one. She was just one of many. And the worst part was, they had all followed Zina. As the sun began to set, the once celebratory village now stood in chaos. Angry voices filled the air. "Who has done this? How did this happen? Who corrupted our daughters?" Then, a single voice cut through the noise. It was Zina. All heads turned toward the trembling girl who had spoken. She was one of Zina's closest followers. "Zina showed us another way," she confessed. "She told us we didn't have to obey tradition. She said we could be free." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The truth had been spoken. The elders turned toward the chief. "Bring her forward." A group of warriors stormed into Mama Joho's hut, dragging Zina out by her arms. Even now, she did not cower. She smirked as they pulled her before the village, her gaze defiant. "You blame me," she scoffed. "I did not force them. They chose for themselves." Her words were like poison to the ears of the villagers. The chief lifted his staff, his face twisted in fury. "You have tainted our land," he roared. "And for this, the gods demand justice." The oracle stepped forward, his voice grave. "The balance has been broken. The gods demand a sacrifice." Zina's smirk finally faded. She knew what those words meant. The village wanted her blood. The village square was no longer a place of celebration. Darkness had fallen, but the firelight revealed the faces of the villagers, angry, betrayed, and desperate for justice. The test had been failed, and now, Kijani stood at the brink of chaos. In the center of the square, Zina knelt before the elders, her once proud expression now masked by silence. Around her, the daughters of Kijani stood with bowed heads, their shame hanging over them like a heavy storm. The oracle, standing beside the chief, lifted his staff and spoke. His voice was cold and final. The gods have seen the truth. Kijani's daughters have broken their sacred bond, and now, our land is cursed. A collective gasp ran through the villagers. The chief clenched his jaw, his eyes blazing with fury. Then we must make things right, he said. The oracle nodded. To lift the curse, the gods demand an offering. 2 pure maidens must carry the sacrifice to the sacred altar. But there were no pure maidens left. A heavy silence fell over the crowd. Then, a single voice broke through the hush. Father, we have no one. It was Adana, the chief's daughter. Her face was pale, her voice trembling, but her words held the weight of truth. There are no virgins left in Kijani. The village erupted in cries of horror. Women fell to the ground, wailing. Fathers gripped their staffs in fury, staring at their daughters in disbelief. How can this be? One elder whispered. Not a single one, another murmured. The gods will destroy us. The oracle's expression darkened. His staff struck the ground, sending echoes through the village. Then the gods will take another offering, he said. His eyes landed on Zina. All eyes turned to the city woman, the one who had brought this change. She is the cause of this corruption, a man spat. She must be punished. The village roared in agreement. The chief stepped forward, his face like carved stone. Zina, you have turned our daughters against our ways. You have invited ruin upon Kijani. Zina lifted her chin, but for the first time, there was fear in her eyes. I did not force them, she said, though her voice lacked its usual confidence. They chose their own paths. The oracle ignored her. He raised his staff high, speaking in the voice of the gods. Zina will carry the sacrifice alone. Gasps filled the air. She will walk to the sacred altar deep in the forest and offer herself to the gods. If her sacrifice is accepted, the curse will be lifted. If not. He did not finish. He didn't need to. Everyone knew what happened to those rejected by the gods. Zina's eyes widened. You can't do this, she whispered. You think killing me will change anything? Your daughters are no longer the same. Even if I die, the past cannot be undone. The chief's gaze was like steel. Then let the gods decide. Before dawn, Zina was led out of the village gates, her wrist bound with ceremonial rope. Behind her, 2 warriors followed, ensuring she did not flee. The forest was silent, as if even the animals watched her fate. The path to the altar was long and treacherous. Zina stumbled over roots, her feet bleeding, but she kept walking. With every step, the weight of her choices pressed against her chest. Had she truly brought ruin to Kijani? Or had she simply shown the village girls another way of life? She did not know anymore. Finally, after 2 days of walking, she arrived at the sacred altar, a towering stone, blackened with centuries of offerings. The warriors placed the ceremonial bowl at her feet. Inside lay a dagger and a white cloth. The oracle's words echoed in her mind. The gods demand an offering. Her own life. Zina looked up to the sky, whispering one final prayer. Would the gods forgive her? Would they save Kijani? Or would she become a forgotten soul, lost to the curse? She took the dagger in her hand. And she closed her eyes. Zina knelt before the sacred altar, the dagger cold in her trembling hands. The towering black stone loomed over her, ancient and unyielding, as if waiting for the gods' judgment. The warrior stood a few paces away, watching in silent anticipation. The village had demanded her sacrifice, believing that only her blood would cleanse the sins of Kijani. But as Zina stared at the blade, her heart pounded with a question she could not escape. Will my death truly change anything? The wind shifted, calling around the altar like unseen spirits. The sky, Once a dull grey, suddenly darkened, swirling with ominous clouds. Then, a deep rumbling echoed across the heavens. Thunder. The warriors stepped back in fear, gripping their staffs tightly. The ground trembled beneath Zina's knees, as if the very earth was awakening. A crack of lightning split the sky, striking the sacred altar with blinding light. Zina shielded her eyes, her breath caught in her throat. And then, the voice. Deep. Ancient. Unforgiving. Blood will not cleanse what is already stained. The warriors fell to their knees, their faces pale with terror. They had heard the gods. Zina's chest rose and fell with ragged breaths. She lifted her head, eyes wide, searching the heavens. Then what must I do? She whispered. The wind howled in response, carrying the answer like a curse. You will live. But your burden will be great. Zina's hands trembled, the dagger slipping from her grasp. It clattered onto the stone, its metallic ring swallowed by the rolling thunder. Back in Kijani village, the people waited. Mothers wept, fearing the god's wrath. Fathers stood in silence, their pride broken. The village elders gathered in the shrine, praying for a sign. And then, the baobab tree, split in half by lightning, began to heal. The dried leaves turned green once more. The dying cattle staggered to their feet. The rotting crops bloomed with life again. A collective gasp rippled through Kijani. The curse is lifting, someone shouted. Hope flickered in the eyes of the villagers. But even as life returned, one truth remained: the innocence they had once cherished was gone. The village girls, once pure symbols of tradition, had changed forever. No test could erase what had been done. No offering could turn back time. The people of Kijani had to face the truth: their daughters had chosen a different path. And they had to live with it. As the villagers rejoiced, a figure appeared on the horizon. Zina. She walked alone, her feet bruised and bloody, her body weighed down by exhaustion. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She lives. The oracle stepped forward, his face unreadable. He had expected her death. Instead, she stood before him, alive, yet changed. The gods have spoken, Zina said, her voice quiet but unwavering. They have spared me, but they have given me a burden to carry. The oracle studied her for a long moment. Then, with slow certainty, he spoke. Then let it be so. He turned to the people of Kijani. Zina will not die, but she will not be free. For 12 years, she shall serve the gods, alone, away from our village. She will carry our sacrifices, cleanse the shrine, and walk the path of repentance. The crowd murmured, some still angry, others relieved. But the chief stepped forward, his voice cold as stone. You will never be one of us again, Zina. Zina nodded, accepting her fate. The girl who had once walked into Kijani with confidence and charm now walked away as a shadow of her former self. She had sought to change the village. And in the end, she had. Years passed. The daughters of Kijani grew into women, their eyes no longer filled with naive innocence, but with knowledge, some of it bitter, some of it liberating. Some embraced tradition again, marrying and raising families. Others chose a different life, forging paths that had never before existed in Kijani. But the elders never forgot. And neither did the parents. The story of Zina became a warning, a whisper tale told to young girls at night. Beware the woman from the city. Beware the path that tempts the heart. For once lost, innocence can never be reclaimed. And so, Kijani was never the same again. But whether that was a curse, or a gift, was a lesson for the next generation to decide.